The chlorine stung my nostrils, a familiar, almost comforting sensation. The late afternoon sun warmed my skin as I glided through the cool water of my backyard pool. After a grueling week of budget meetings, community outreach events, and the constant low hum of city issues demanding my attention, this was my sanctuary. Just me, the shimmering water, and the quiet hum of the pool filter. I, Damian Jones, police chief of this city, was enjoying a rare moment of peace. No sirens, no angry constituents, no paperwork threatening to bury me alive. Just the simple, rhythmic stroke of my arms cutting through the water. I'd always found solace in water. Growing up, it was the creek behind my grandmother's house where I'd spend countless hours catching tadpoles and skipping stones. Later, it was the community pool, a haven from the summer heat and the urban chaos. Now, it was my own little piece of paradise, a symbol of the hard work and dedication that had brought me to this point in my life. I'd earned this tranquility, and damn it, I was going to enjoy it. I floated on my back, gazing up at the cloudless blue sky, letting the sun bake away the tension knotted in my shoulders. A smile tugged at the corner of my lips. For a moment, I forgot the city's problems, the ever-present scrutiny, the weight of responsibility that rested on my shoulders. I was jolted from my reverie by a shrill, piercing voice that sliced through the air like a jagged knife. It was her. Karen. My neighbor, and a constant source of low-grade irritation. I could already feel the familiar tightening in my jaw. She always found something to complain about. The height of my grass, the color of my house, the way I parked my car, the list was endless. It was always something, and it was always directed at me. I sighed, pushing myself upright in the water. This was going to be one of those days. I could feel it in my bones. The idyllic afternoon was officially over. I braced myself for the inevitable onslaught, knowing that whatever ridiculous grievance she had conjured up this time, it was unlikely to be rooted in reality. More likely, it would be another thinly veiled excuse to unleash her particular brand of vitriol, a toxic cocktail of prejudice and entitlement that she seemed to reserve exclusively for me. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I was the police chief. I dealt with far worse every single day. I could handle a disgruntled neighbor. Or so I told myself. Turn that racket down. Her voice, laced with venom, echoed across my backyard. I squinted, shielding my eyes from the sun as I looked towards the chain-link fence separating our properties. There she stood, arms crossed, face contorted in a mask of indignation. I can't even hear myself think. I frowned. I don't have any music playing, Karen. It was the truth. The only sound was the gentle hum of the pool equipment and the chirping of birds in the nearby trees. But logic and reason were rarely effective weapons against her particular brand of irrationality. "Don't you lie to me, Jones," she screeched, her voice rising in pitch. "I can hear it thumping all the way over here. You people always have to be so loud and obnoxious." The casual racism stung, a familiar but unwelcome burn. It was always, "you people," with her. Never a direct accusation, always a veiled generalization laced with prejudice. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to respond in kind. I knew that engaging with her would only escalate the situation, but her words were deliberately designed to provoke, to chip away at my composure. "Karen, I'm asking you politely." "There is no music playing," I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. "Perhaps you're hearing something from another neighbor." Her face twisted into a sneer. "Oh, I'm sure. Everyone else around here is so considerate. It's always you causing problems. You think you can just do whatever you want because, well, because you're you." The implication hung heavy in the air. It was the unspoken truth that fueled her animosity, the underlying current of racism that permeated every interaction. It wasn't about the music, or the grass, or the car. It was about the color of my skin. It was about the audacity of a black man living in her predominantly white neighborhood, a black man who dared to have a successful career and a comfortable life. "Karen, you're clearly mistaken," I said, trying to defuse the situation. "I suggest you go back inside and try to relax. I'm going to enjoy my swim." I turned my back to her, hoping to signal that the conversation was over. But I knew, deep down, that this was far from over. She wasn't going to let it go that easily. She never did. As I sank back into the water, I could feel her eyes burning into my back, the weight of her resentment pressing down on me. This wasn't just about a perceived noise violation. This was about power, control, and her desperate need to assert her perceived superiority. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that things were about to get much, much worse. I hadn't been back in the water for more than a few minutes when I heard her voice again, this time even louder and more hysterical. "I'm calling the police. I am being harassed. This man is threatening me." My blood ran cold. This was a new level of insanity, even for her. I stood up in the pool, the water cascading off my body, and turned to face her. "Karen, what are you doing? I haven't threatened you. I haven't even spoken to you beyond telling you there isn't any music playing." She ignored me, her eyes fixed on her phone. "Yes, I need the police at my address, immediately. I am being assaulted and harassed by my neighbor. He's being aggressive and making threats. I'm afraid for my safety." Her voice dripped with false fear, a performance designed to manipulate the situation to her advantage. My mind raced. This was beyond ridiculous. This was dangerous. A false accusation, especially one involving a black man and a white woman, could have devastating consequences. I knew how the system worked, how quickly assumptions could be made, how easily prejudice could cloud judgment. I was the police chief, yet here I was, potentially facing arrest and public humiliation based on a blatant lie. The irony was bitter and overwhelming. "Karen, you need to stop this," I said, my voice hardening. "You're making a false report. This is a serious offense." She just laughed, a high-pitched, manic sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, I'm sure the police will believe me. I'm the one who's calling for help. I'm the one who's afraid." She continued to relay her fabricated story to the 911 operator, embellishing the details, adding layers of drama and outright lies. She claimed I had yelled at her, that I had approached the fence in a threatening manner, that I had made lewd and suggestive comments. Every word was a calculated act of malice, a weapon wielded with ruthless precision. I stood there, frozen, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of disbelief and anger. I wanted to scream, to deny her accusations, to defend myself against her slander. But I knew that any attempt to reason with her would be futile. She was too far gone, too consumed by her own warped sense of reality. All I could do was wait for the police to arrive and hope that they would see through her charade. But even as I told myself that, a seed of doubt began to sprout in my mind. What if they didn't? What if they automatically sided with her, the damsel in distress, against the menacing black man? The thought was terrifying, a stark reminder of the systemic biases that still permeated the justice system, even in my own city. I was the police chief, sworn to uphold the law, yet I was powerless to stop this woman from using the law as a weapon against me. The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Karen, emboldened by the approaching reinforcements, puffed out her chest and glared at me triumphantly. "They're here," she announced, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "Now you're going to get what's coming to you." I gritted my teeth, trying to maintain my composure. This was it. The moment of truth. I watched as two patrol cars screeched to a halt in front of my house, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow across the scene. Two officers emerged, their hands resting on their holstered weapons. They were young, probably fresh out of the academy, and their faces were etched with a mixture of apprehension and determination. "Police! Show me your hands," one of the officers shouted, his voice tight with authority. I slowly raised my hands, palms open, trying to project an air of calm and cooperation. "Officers, I'm Damian Jones, and I'm the police chief. The effect was immediate and palpable. The officers froze, their eyes widening in disbelief. Their hands dropped from their weapons, and the tension visibly drained from their bodies. They recognized me instantly. They knew my face, my voice, my reputation. I was their boss, their leader, the man who set the tone for the entire department. Karen, however, seemed oblivious to the shift in atmosphere. "Arrest him," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He assaulted me. He threatened me. He needs to be locked up." The officers exchanged a nervous glance. They were caught in an impossible situation, torn between their duty to respond to a call for help and their respect for their superior officer. "Ma'am, please calm down," one of the officers said, his voice carefully neutral. "We need to hear both sides of the story." I stepped forward, addressing the officers directly. "Officers, this woman has made a false report. I was simply swimming in my pool when she started yelling at me, accusing me of playing loud music. I told her there was no music playing, and she proceeded to call 911 and falsely accuse me of assault and harassment." The officers listened intently, their faces unreadable. They knew my reputation. They knew I was a strict disciplinarian, but also a fair and just leader. They knew I wouldn't lie to them. The silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by Karen's indignant sputtering. She couldn't seem to process what was happening. Her carefully constructed narrative was crumbling before her very eyes. The officers weren't buying it. They weren't falling for her act. "Ma'am," the other officer said, stepping forward. "We need to get your statement, but we also need to advise you that making a false report to the police is a serious crime. Do you understand?" Karen's face flushed crimson. But he assaulted me," she stammered, her voice losing its earlier confidence. "He was threatening me." "Ma'am, we have no evidence to support your claims," the officer replied, his voice firm. "In fact, given the circumstances, it appears more likely that you are the one who has committed a crime." He turned to his partner and nodded. "Place her under arrest." Karen's eyes widened in horror. "What? You can't do that. I'm the victim here." The officers ignored her protests and moved to handcuff her. She struggled, kicking and screaming, but they quickly subdued her and led her towards the patrol car. As they passed me, she shot me a look of pure hatred, her eyes burning with rage and disbelief. "This isn't over, Jones," she screamed. "You haven't heard the last of me." I watched as they drove her away, a strange mix of relief and weariness washing over me. The immediate threat was gone, but the underlying problem remained. The racism, the prejudice, the entitlement, it was all still there, simmering beneath the surface. This incident was just a symptom of a much larger disease. The officers returned, their faces apologetic. "Chief, we're so sorry this happened," one of them said. "We had no idea." I waved my hand dismissively. "It's all right, officers. You were just doing your job. I appreciate you handling the situation professionally." "Is there anything else we can do, Chief?" the other officer asked. I thought for a moment. "Yes," I said. "File a full report, and make sure it's thoroughly investigated. I want to know everything about this woman, her background, her history. And I want to make sure she's prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." The next few days were a whirlwind of media attention and internal investigations. The story of the racist Karen who falsely accused the police chief went viral, sparking outrage and debate across the city and beyond. I became a reluctant symbol of the fight against prejudice and discrimination, a role I never sought but one I couldn't shirk. The internal investigation cleared me of any wrongdoing, of course. But the damage was done. My privacy had been violated, my reputation had been unfairly tarnished, and the ugly specter of racism had been thrust into the spotlight. I found myself spending hours answering questions from reporters, attending community meetings, and giving interviews about the importance of racial equality and the need to address systemic biases in the justice system. Karen, meanwhile, was facing a multitude of charges, including making a false police report, harassment, and disorderly conduct. Her life had been turned upside down. She lost her job, her friends, and her standing in the community.